Hi YouTube, it's back here. Sorry, there's a fly. It's from So Be Curated. This is the second video in a series I'm doing on how I put together needle books. So I have firstly finished my tiny one. So I'd shown in the end of part one that I'd put that together, and then I have just stitched on a little bit of elastic. And because if I'd added that earlier, if I'd thought about it earlier, I would have probably attached it between the wool felt here and the exterior, but I didn't. So I just stitched it on the outside here, and then I've covered that with a little piece of an old vintage fabric, which I like a lot. And then I've found this gorgeous little daisy button here, and I have put that on the front. And this is such a little needle book that I just wanted something very simple for this, but beautiful. And this to me is perfect. I've also made some progress on my large needle book, but I haven't done anything on the medium one so far. So as you can see it's pinned together, but there's no stitching holding this together at the moment. I have done a cantha stitch on this beautiful exterior fabric that I had, and I did it with a linen thread from France, and it's not near me now, but I'll bring it and I'll show it in a later part of this video. So if you're looking for something similar, and I've just actually got some delivered from France, so I might put some in some kits or something. But I just cantha stitched that. So I didn't want to use, often when I'm cantha stitching, I'm using a pearl 8 or a pearl 12 thread. I just wanted something a bit finer than that didn't distract from the gorgeous fabric. This fabric, I would say, is a crepe de chine or something like that. It's got a little bit of sheen in it, and it's got a little bit of a pattern that does horizontal lines. So that's why I went with the vertical stitching for my cantha. And then I have also attached a vintage yo-yo, which I've kind of put some stamen in to make it a bit like a flower. Put a little bit of a bit of a rosette kind of feel to it, and just a bit of linen that will get better over time as it frays behind. And I've done that quite irregularly, and I think that just adds something nice at the front there. Now, my edge here looks a bit frilly because I haven't actually canthaed through to this seam that was on this reclaimed piece of fabric. And I've just pinned in place. Sorry, I got distracted by something. So we're just pinned together, and where have I pinned? I can't even find the pins there. So, here. So I've done that external stitching, and then I've also, and I pinned this in so it's in place. But some of these pages didn't go all the way through. So I'm going to seam through the center here, but into that seam, I want to catch this. So this page here only goes halfway through, and this one all sits to the back of the center seam. So I just did a little stitch holding all those layers together along there. It's got kind of like a little seam. And then I am going to do, you can see here, so it's caught in there, but it looks still beautiful to me. As I said, I'm going to stitch this to that, but this one's going to be free. And I'm just going to run a center seam through there. So that's the next step of this large needle book, is to put that center seam in and then start dealing with some of the things that I know I'm doing, like stitching this down, stitching the embellishments that I've chosen. There'll be more embellishments to this, and stitching here to that part of this piece. I will need to put another line of stitching through here to hold this. So maybe I should actually, look, I'm actually going to seam the center here. That's the right place to seam it. I just told you the wrong thing. It's not getting seamed through here. It's getting seamed through here, which will hold that in place. And then, start adding embellishments as I like them. I am not going to stitch the exterior, being this layer of wool felt, to that bit like my external layer, until I have finished dealing with the center. I'm not going to stitch down this piece of linen that just forms a feature at the back. The next step is to get this into the center, and it will still all be flapped open. This is just pinned here at the moment and it will stay there. I will not be doing any seaming around the edges at this point. And all these bits get trimmed off when I'm happy with my internal layout. So I wanted to show where I'm up to now, so none of the steps seem overwhelming if you're putting one of these things together. So it's not a very good video, is it? It's seamed together, and not here like I said I might do. It is seamed through here. So you can see there is a line of stitching, and the stitching goes from here through to here. So the bits extend beyond that stitching, and I have just used Pearl 8. I usually use this Aircrew colour. It works well for me. And on the exterior, those stitches do come through. So when I am doing the stitches, the pin's fallen out from somewhere, I go in at the front, I check the back, I come back through from the back to and I manipulate the stitch so it looks neat front and back. So I'm constantly turning my work when I'm doing that line of stitching to ensure that the result is one that is neat front and back. And that's just because there's lots of layers to get through and your needle can go a bit wonky in the middle. So you just kind of play around with it until it gets into the right spot. Now, the reason I don't go all the way to the end of, like, stitch all the way here and all the way here, is because I may end up turning some of the fabrics over. Now, this one is already pinned and caught in that seam, but sometimes you'll have fabric extending above and you'll want to turn it. If it's stitched right to the top, there's no opportunity to do that later, because this is one of the, after the layout and whatever you're doing to your external piece, this is the next step. So on top of that, what have I done? I've trimmed down my lace piece here just because it was hanging out and really annoying me. Nothing that way. On this way, I have used Metla thread. This is my thread that I use for anything that I do by hand. It's just a really good silk cotton finish 60 weight. And I have just used kind of like an applique stitch to stitch that down. And where it was below the fold, I made sure this was pinned out of the way when I did that. And then there are some stitches that come through here. That doesn't worry me. We are making a handmade item. We are going to occasionally see a stitch. And then I've left this one free, which was always the intention as well. And then the other thing that I have done in here is, while these layers are apart, so this is going to be stitched down to that exterior layer, I have attached my pocket. So that will be, and I think I'm going to put a little button and a loop here just to secure it so I can put some things in. And then I didn't stitch down this end here because it can actually work as another pocket underneath, and it's caught by a row of stitching here, so you can put something in and it'll be safe there. But I didn't want these stitches of that blanket stitch that I've used at the edge here to come through to the exterior. So that is where I'm up to. Next steps for me are just more embellishment. So I will start attaching some of these things down, joining this down, adding on my piece of, what is that, the measuring tape there, that kind of a thing. And then just check I'm happy with my embellishments before actually closing up my needlebook. Hi YouTube, it's Sunday afternoon here. I'm pretty sure that I started making the needlebooks that I've been showing here, or gathering the stuff, on Monday. So less than a week later, but it might be a week to the day. So I've finished my needlebook, and you might notice there's a bit of a change. I took off my rosette that I've put there. Don't worry, you'll come across it again. And I've used this just stunning vintage rickrack, and it's got like this excellent blue stitching. to wrap around. I've said it before, but I like when I wrap around to tie on this side. I don't know why. So I always make long ties, or I have a loop just here. So the exterior of my needle book looks like so. Just put those out of the way. I have canvas stitched through this beautiful vintage fabric. I've got a little bit of linen on the back and with some stitching, and I have 6 crosses. Now, if I add a feature cross, I often add 4 or 6, 4 for the number of my children, 6 for my whole, like my husband, myself, and our 4 kids. Sometimes 5 actually for those 5. Not, I don't know. They tend to be, if I'm adding a symbolic cross, that's what I tend to add. And I just did that with, that was a pearl 8 thread as well. So this, the canvas stitching here was done with a linen thread from France, an old vintage one. When you open up, I mentioned that I wasn't going to take my wool felt all the way to the edge here because I quite like that this fabric just, like it turned over, because this was probably taken out of a curtain or something like that. And I always like to make a feature of something like that if I have an opportunity to. So I did there, and then I just blanket stitched with like a feature pearl 8 thread, not a, like one that's going to draw attention. The wool felt down to the edge of the fabric here. Then I have this sandwich doily, and I have simply just folded that over 3 times. Blanket stitched down the sides here. I've left it open here to put things in, and then I now have a pocket here. Stitched along here so it's in place. Attached down with kind of like an applique stitch, these yo-yos here, and a little stitch with metler thread. This tiny little scrap of fabric. It's a little hanky with a bee on it, bee for me, for Beck. And then I've just added, sorry, I'm already using my needle book. I've added a row of stitching here and up the side. So I just wanted to keep that in place, and I just thought it was nice. And I didn't particularly love how my stitching from my yo-yos came through onto the back here. So I hid them with this flower here. Sorry, somebody came into the bedroom where I'm filming this and then left the door open. So you probably got some, I don't know, whatever my son is watching on television in the background there. So this is a piece of felted wool. I've stuck my rope, well, I haven't stuck it. I've stitched it on just through the center there. I quite like it being loose. It's got a little bit of tape measure here. Let's fold it up. Oops. Little page of, I believe this was from perhaps a hanky, or it might have been from a corner of a doily. And I've just done a little row of 1 strand of embroidery cotton stitching there and a little cross. I like the crosses. I made sure this was nicely done, sorry. This one just free. I love pink and mustard together. So, and then this side I've attached onto this hanky, or it was perhaps a napkin actually. And it now has 2 pockets here for me to put like packs of needles, or if I was doing some EPP, maybe it would go in there, little bits of stitching. You do have a little bit of the Metler invisible thread coming, well, not invisible, like silk cotton finished thread in a 60 weight coming through where I've attached this part down here. That doesn't worry me at all. So I just stitched down the side here with a pearl thread, do a little cross in the corner because I like to add a cross sometimes, and then just kind of took that little stitching across the center as well, just for a little bit of a feature. Next in this one, I have this lovely, so that green thing there is just a pin coming through. Lovely piece of vintage lace that I loved. And I've just added an edge on this because I often make a bundle of things that go together. I've used the fabrics that I'm using in the other needle books here as well, so that they're kind of tied together. Another page of that felted wool, just put a little bit of this fabric on here because I'd snipped it off here. I don't like to waste any vintage fabric, so I use it all. Always like a little embellishment like that. Put a little acantha stitch and a little cross through with pearl 8 thread there. And then that's the back of the hanky that's just been stitched over. Very simple page there, an extra yo-yo. And where that linen has come over from the front, I've also made it a feature of the back and attached that with a blanket stitch down the side. Now, all my layers. So I've got felt, I've got batting in there, and I've got that exterior layer. They are just held together along the edge with blanket stitch. I try and do mine quite, like naively, I guess is the word. The beauty of these kind of things is their naivety. So I don't like it to be perfect. I sometimes have to work quite hard to be a little bit more naive, but I just think this is beautiful. It's got a lovely weight to it. I don't know if I can zoom you out. It will be in use or kind of in the shop for kind of inspiration, I guess. But really happy with how this one turned out. And then I'm going to show you my other needlebook, the medium-sized one, in the next video. So this will be the end of the second video in my series of how I go about making a needlebook. Really easy, really simple. Really the beauty of it comes from the textiles you choose and just embracing that kind of using what you have and love of vintage beautifulness, I think. Okay, happy stitching, everyone.